On the coldest evening of the year, a little boy in a yellow raincoat pressed his face to a fogged cafe window and whispered, "Dad, she's crying." Outside, under a flickering street lamp, a young woman cupped a paper cup like it was a candle, the number 23 scrawled on the side in black marker, and sang "Happy Birthday" to herself in a voice so soft the night might swallow it. The father hesitated, rent due, shifts double booked, a heart stitched together by responsibilities. But then the boy tugged his sleeve and said, "It's not a birthday if there's no cake." That was the moment everything, guilt, fear, caution, tilted toward a choice that would change 3 lives. The bakery closed at 9. At 8:57, the last of the lights were already dimming and the day-old pastries boxed for donation. Omar rolled his shoulders to melt the ache of a 14-hour shift and glanced at the clock, a habit that had become a prayer. He wasn't supposed to be working this late anymore, not since the coughs had started, those deep, rib-echoing hacks he carefully hid from his son. But pink slips don't care about coughs, and bills don't listen to promises. Somewhere between the glaze and the buttercream, between the cash drawer and the mop, he'd learned how to be father, mother, cook, taxi driver, and nurse. The chest x-ray could wait, his son Zane's school shoes could not. Zane liked to sit by the window during the last hour, head bent over a battered activity book while he changed "Find 10 Differences" into stories with villains and unlikely friendships. He was 5, with a voice that made strangers look up and a way of asking questions that hurt and healed in the same breath. These days, he asked about his mother less. The picture they kept on the fridge, her hand squashing Zane's cheeks as she kissed him, had become a silent prayer on Saturday mornings. Sometimes, Omar ran a wet finger along the edge of the photo to lift the dust and think of the way she laughed at his jokes even when they were bad. Grief had taught him 2 things: love takes many forms, and some of them look like getting up at 4 a.m. to beat the dough. When the bell over the door tinkled and a gust of night ribboned in, Omar looked up out of habit, then looked away again just as quickly. He had grown practiced at not seeing. Men who needed warmth but offered anger. Women who needed a bathroom and offered a story Omar couldn't do anything about. Not seeing was a survival skill, it kept the lights on and the doors open. But Zane saw. "She's crying," he said, nose leaving a comment on the glass. "And she's singing Happy Birthday." Omar followed his gaze. The girl, he had to call her that, she looked younger than she probably was, sat on the curb with her back to the lamp. The light made a halo of frizz around her hair. She had the kind of alertness that comes from sleeping in the open. Even with her eyes wet, she kept checking the corners, scanning exits. She held a paper cup like a secret. Written on the side, 23. She wasn't drinking from it, just holding it near her mouth like a microphone, lips shaping a song only she would hear. "It's not a birthday if there's no cake," Zane repeated, as if stating a mathematical fact. Omar's gut clenched. "We don't know her story," he said. "Then ask." It should have ended there, with a father's shake of the head and a son's reluctant acceptance. But Zane had a way of looking into people like they were puzzles he could solve, and Omar, tired, soft in the places grief softened him, couldn't bear that across the glass a woman was singing to no one. He walked outside, arms folded against the wind. "Evening," he said, and the woman flinched, eyes snapping to his face, then to the lit, open, sign behind him. "We're closing," he added quickly, because people in her situation feared being told to move along. "But, we have cake." She blinked. Up close, she looked both older and younger. Older in the way survival erases childhood. Younger in the way her cheeks went red when she tried to hide that she'd been crying. The word cake worked through her like a trickle of warmth. Her eyes went to the window, to Zane's wide smile. "I'm not. I don't have money," she said, voice small and hoarse. "It's a birthday," Omar said. "My son says there must be cake." She hesitated. Pride is heavy even when your backpack is light. "I'm Nuri," she said finally. "And I'm exactly 23 for the next," she squinted at some inner clock, 3 hours. Happy birthday, Nuri, Omar said, stepping aside so the heat could touch her shoulders. Come in. The bell chimed again and the smell of sugar and cinnamon wrapped them. Zayn jumped from his stool like a spring. You can blow out the candle, he announced, already fishing a bent candle from the drawer where they kept ribbon and twine. Dad, let's put it on the chocolate one. Omar shot a look at the cake in the display case. It was a small round leftover from a cancelled order, frosting smooth as a lake. He had reserved it in his mind for a weekend special that would pay for groceries. He could cut 2 slices, he told himself. 2 slices wouldn't break the week. He plated them, slow and ceremonial, while Zayn stuck the candle in and insisted they turn off the lights. For a moment, the bakery became glow and breath and 3 voices tripping over "Dear Nuri." She laughed on the word "dear" like it surprised her, and when the song ended, she closed her eyes before blowing as if her wish was something delicate that might fly off if she exhaled too hard. They ate. Zayn asked the kind of questions that made adults wince. Where do you sleep? Is it scary? Do you have a backpack because you're going on an adventure? Omar said his name in a warning tone, but Nuri just took a careful bite and said, yes. Sometimes. And I suppose, yes, with a small smile. It's not the adventure I chose, but it's the one I'm having. As they talked, pieces of her story fell like crumbs between them. A childhood that smelled like kerosene and cumin, a father who loved her in his way but whose way came with fists. A scholarship to a design course she had almost taken. A boyfriend who said the city would be their fresh start and then left fresh as morning, with her savings folded into his sock. A week of, I'll figure it out, a month of, I'm fine, and then the long slide into nights on buses and mornings under awnings, learning which church hall served soup without questions, which station guard looked away, how to hide fear behind polite. Omar listened, jaw tight. He'd expected something messy and had found something simple, a sequence of small abandonments that together looked like a free fall. He felt the old, familiar guilt, how close any of us live to the cliff's edge, how many times he himself had been saved by luck disguised as kindness. Tomorrow, he said, surprising himself, I have to be at the wholesale market at 5. But after I drop Zayn at school, I could drive you to the day shelter on Maple. They've got lockers, and sometimes, if you get there early, shower tokens. Nuri looked at the window. Outside, the street lamp threw a tired halo. I don't want to be a problem, she whispered. You're a person, Zayn said, as if correcting a math error. That night, Omar cleaned the bakery slower than usual because it meant Nuri could sit longer in the warmth. He wanted to offer the back room couch, but the line between help and harm is thin, and he'd learned to respect it. Kindness is not rescue, it is room to breathe. So he gave her a pair of wool socks from the donation box and a paper cup of tea with extra sugar, and when they locked the door at 9, they walked to the bus stop together. He pressed bus fare into her palm. She opened her mouth to protest, but he said, please. For my son's sleep, and she closed it again, smiling like a secret. On the way home, Zayn was unusually quiet. Then, Dad, do wishes work better if 3 people wish them? Omar thought of the cough tucked in his chest, the make-believe cushion in his bank account, the way grief still woke him on Thursdays. Maybe, he said. Maybe that's the trick. Chapter 2. The trick, if there was one, turned out to be showing up. A week stretched into a shape that could hold more than survival. On Monday, Omar drove Nuri to the day shelter and waited while she stood in a line that moved like winter, slow, reluctant, stubborn. He watched from the van as she exited an hour later with damp hair and the loose, floaty look of someone surprised by clean skin. On Tuesday, she walked past the bakery at noon and offered to sweep the sidewalk in exchange for a sandwich. Omar wanted to say yes, needed the help, but policy was policy and mixing charity with employment is how businesses fold. So he made her a sandwich anyway and added an apple and said, next time bring me a story about the city I don't know. And she did, About violinists in tunnels and the woman who sells bright bracelets outside the courthouse and how the pigeons at the university square look at you like they understand politics. On Wednesday, Zane's teacher sent home a note. He had been quiet in class, staring out the window as if waiting for something. That afternoon, when the bell rang over the bakery door and Nuri stepped in with her hands wrapped around warm air, Zane practically vibrated. "We made a cake at school," he told her, "and I told them about your candle," and then he stopped and looked at his father in that requesting way, the one that asked for permission and forgiveness at once. "Let's sit," Omar said, and they did, all three of them, because the bakery had become more than a shop by then. It had become a small, amber-lit promise. By the end of the week, Nuri had a library card and a list of design tutorials to watch on the public computers. She had a locker at the shelter and a rhythm for the night buses that felt less like fleeing and more like biding time. On Friday evening, she arrived with a sheet of paper warm from the printer, a simple poster concept for the bakery's weekend specials. "You don't have to use it," she said quickly. When I'm drawing, I remember who I am." Omar held the page and had to swallow twice before speaking. The layout was clean, the colors inviting without shouting, the tiny illustrated croissant in the corner smiling in a way that somehow wasn't silly. "It's beautiful," he said, and saw something unstoppable flicker through her eyes. Was it pride? Relief? The memory of a ladder she might still climb. He taped it to the window. 2 customers commented on it within the hour. By Saturday, 3 more posters had bloomed under Nuri's hand, and people were taking pictures of the croissant like it was a minor celebrity. Omar paid her, not as charity but as a freelancer, which is another word for the space between what you are and what you're becoming. The mornings were still hard. Kindness doesn't erase the smell of wet wool or the weight of a backpack digging into your spine. Nuri learned to glide around the parts of the city that swallowed girls like her, to walk like she had somewhere to be. She learned the names of the men who slept in a cluster under the bridge, Hector who played chess with bottle caps, Ms. Ruth who crocheted hats from grocery bags, and she told Zane their stories in sanitized slices, because children are oceans and you shouldn't throw storms at them without a boat. At the end of 2 weeks, a small miracle, the shelter offered her a spot in a short-term women's residence, 6 beds, 12 weeks, a door that locked. The counselor said she'd been noticed for the way she kept showing up at the library and for the posters at the bakery everyone kept mentioning. Show up enough, and the world sometimes shows up back. On the night she moved in, Nuri stood in the bakery looking at the back room couch as if. Morning doors, a name badge that spelled her name right. She had 2 pairs of socks without holes and a savings jar with exactly 2,000 rupees rattling like brave little seeds. "Do you know what you want for your next birthday?" Zane asked as he licked frosting from his knuckle. Nuri looked at the calendar, at all the days between now and then, and didn't flinch. "A small apartment," she said. "Plants on the window. A kettle that whistles." She paused. "And to not be afraid of the night." Zane considered. "That's 4 wishes," he said. "But if 3 people wish them, it's okay." Omar poured tea and caught Nuri's eyes over the steam. "We can be 3, he said. They made a habit of it then, 3 wishes spoken out loud every Friday night, after the last table was wiped. Some nights it was big things, health, home, enoughness. Other nights it was foolish, no more burnt scones, a customer who'd teach them magic tricks, longer sunsets. They laughed at the silly ones and held quiet around the fierce ones. Wishing didn't repair the world, but it taught them to name the shape of what they were walking toward. Months later, on a damp morning that promised rain, a customer pointed at the croissant poster and asked if the artist took commissions. He ran a community garden that needed a sign, something bright, something hopeful. Nuri's hands shook when she wrote down her email address. She charged less than she should and worked more than she needed, painting into the night while the residence's radiator made small, comforting clicks. When she carried the finished sign to the garden, a splash of color against chain link, she thought, this is what it feels like to belong to a place. A year spun itself around them quicker than any of them expected. On Nuri's next birthday, the bakery was crowded with the soft chatter of regulars. Plants crowded the window now, fat leaves catching light. There was a kettle on a shelf in the back room that whistled like a bird with opinions. The print shop had expanded her hours. She shared a sunlit room with a nurse who wore her hair in a crown of braids and kept a jar of hard candies on the kitchen counter. Sometimes the nights still stretched long and strange. But they were not endless. When Omar turned off the lights for the candle this time, there were 2 cakes. One had her name piped steady and careful. The other was small and yellow, Zane's choice, decorated with star sprinkles because wishes are stars that listened. They sang louder than last year, because joy is a muscle, and they had exercised it. Nuri closed her eyes and felt the warm press of their presence, the way being seen rearranges the room. Later, after the slices and the crumbs and the laughter, after Zane fell asleep in a chair with frosting on his chin, Nuri stepped to the doorway. The street lamp still flickered, but differently. The night wasn't an enemy so much as a neighbor with a bad habit. She hugged herself and realized her jacket, the one. Memorizing it. "Thank you," she said, and then, as if the words were too small, "I don't know how to put this in a shape that fits. I came in here because I was cold. I'm leaving with something that might be a map." "Don't thank me," Omar said. "Thank the boy who insisted birthdays require cake." Zane beamed. He had lost his 2 front teeth and whistled when he laughed. "Next month is my birthday," he announced, "and I'm going to be 6. That means extra cake." "Deal," Nuri said, and they shook on it like business partners. What they built after that wasn't dramatic. It was 100 small, sturdy things. Nuri designed a set of recipe cards for the bakery, little illustrations of cinnamon sticks and measuring spoons, the kind of whimsical anchors that made people smile. She learned to frost in clean spirals and to talk to customers without shrinking. On nights she couldn't sleep, she wrote plans in a dollar store notebook. Finish the online design course, apply for part-time admin work at the community center, save enough for a shared room. She kept the notebook in her locker and taped a torn, frosting-smeared photo of the croissant poster inside the cover. There were setbacks. A job application got lost. A bus card was stolen. A man at the shelter said something too sharp and old fear poured through her like ice water. One night, walking back from the library, she took a shortcut and remembered immediately why she shouldn't. A group of boys blocked the alley, their laughter unkind, and she felt the old panic climbing. But panic is not a prophecy. She turned on her heel and walked the long way, heart hammering, and realized by the time she reached the bus stop that sometimes bravery is as small as choosing a different street. Midway through the 3rd week, Omar's cough got worse. He hid it like a secret under the counter, but secrets eventually insist. When he dropped a tray because his chest seized, Nuri was there, quick hands steadying hot metal, quick eyes measuring what could be done. "You need a doctor," she said. He shook his head. "I need the bakery." So she drew another map. She took Zane to school, then returned to run front of house while Omar sat in the back and did the books. She taught herself the register in an afternoon, smiled even when the noon rush melted her edges, and went to the clinic with him after the last customer left, standing with arms crossed like a shield while he negotiated payment plans and pried. The diagnosis was a deep but treatable bronchitis. Antibiotics, rest, less flour dust. They left with a bill they could manage and a prescription for both medicine and humility. Nuri taped the clinic instructions to the fridge like a promise. "We're going to pace you," she told Omar, and together they built a schedule that didn't pretend he was invincible. Accepting help feels like weakness until you remember it's a way of staying. On the day Nuri received her first official paycheck, from a small print shop. She wore that first night, had been replaced by a coat with deep pockets. Inside one pocket, keys. Inside the other, a folded drawing of the bakery, tiny hearts in the windows, drawn by Zane. "Thank you," she murmured to the quiet. "Not as debt, but as recognition." Thank you to the boy who believed cake could be a bridge. Thank you to the father who had dared to cross it. Thank you to the version of herself who had stepped into the light even when it made her squint. Behind her, Omar leaned on the doorframe, cough mostly gone, eyes soft. What did you wish for? He asked. Nuri smiled. I wished that no one has to sing happy birthday to themselves in the cold again. He nodded. Big wish. Big wishes are made of small actions, she said. Like cake. Like listening. Like not looking away. They stood there a moment longer, letting the night be just night. Inside, the candles smoked gently. Outside, the city exhaled. Some stories end with grand finales, theirs kept going. A long, steady thread woven through ordinary days, strong enough to hold. If you ask Zayn now whether wishes work better if 3 people wish them, he will tell you yes, certainly, obviously. He will tell you that the magic is not in the candle but in the hands that carry it to the table. He will tell you that birthdays aren't just dates, they are the moments you're reminded you belong to the world and the world belongs to you, and sometimes, that reminder tastes like chocolate and sounds like a bell over a bakery door.